for this honorable opportunity to welcome this August gathering. I would like to welcome all the enthusiastic parents and students who are sincerely committed to willing to take away key points from this program. I extend a hearty welcome to the headmistress, DAV Boys Senior Secondary School, Gopalapuram, Srimati Swarna Prabhakaran, and all the members in the panel list. It gives me great pride to welcome the speaker for the day, Sri Padmanabh, who's our alumnus from DAV Boys, Gopalapuram. Sri Padmanabh is a PhD research scholar at National Center for Biological Sciences, arguably India's foremost institution for fundamental research in the life sciences. An ex-KVPY recipient and recent graduate of ISA Bhopal's 5 years BSMS program, he has broad interest in applied biology, infectious diseases, and microfluidics. In this talk, he'll present a condensed view of the world of academia with an especial focus on the ISAs and their brand of interdisciplinary research. It is not only medicine and engineering children, a special emphasis will be placed appreciating an exceptional, albeit challenging platform to explore exciting professional opportunities. Sri Padmanabh always stayed connected to the school and his juniors, ever ready to don the role of a mentor and guide them in their next phase of life. Over to Sri Padmanabh.
Hello, namaste. Good evening to everyone. I'll start with my screen sharing so that is my screen visible?
Yes, your screen is visible, but your video is not on.
All right, yes. Just give me a second. I'll get that done as well. Oh, okay. Yes. All right. So, hello everyone. Namaste ma'am, namaste to all my teachers whom I keep meeting so frequently, so that is great. Namaste to everyone else who's gathered here. Thank you for this opportunity to speak about the ISAs once again, which is now my alma mater, now that I'm no longer studying at an ISA. I'm really excited to speak because that is what I like doing best. And I hope that over the next 30 to 35 minutes, I will be able to answer a few questions and give you a basic understanding of what the ISAs are. So let's start off. Let me just minimize this and yeah, let's go. All right. So a couple of things which would be useful to keep in mind. I would really appreciate not taking notes because you really don't need to do that. I will be sharing links which are necessary for answering almost any questions you might have. So don't bother writing down stuff. This is not a class. And usually I love interacting while we are going along, but right now we cannot do that. So do post every single question you have in the chat box, which is relevant, and we'll get to it. All right, so we are here to talk about the ISAs, and the ISAs are supposed to be for science. So the first thing which I might invite you to reflect upon is, what does science mean for you? It means multiple things for multiple people, obviously. So for some people, it's a bunch of crazy haired people standing around in lab coats. For some others, it's people writing equations on something like the whiteboard right behind me and trying to make sense of it. For me, it's something I enjoy doing day after day. So I will just go ahead and quote two examples of some of the more popular stuff which many of you might have come across. For instance, I'm fairly certain a bunch of you would be able to recognize what this image over here is. If anyone does, you can put it in the chat box right away. And I'll give a couple seconds before I move on to tell you what this is. I'm fairly certain I should be knowing what this is. Precisely. Great job, guys. So this actually does happen to be the very first picture of a black hole, which was ever generated by the scientific community. And this was a viral tweet which went around the first day when this picture was released to the general public. However, typically what we do conceive of is one scientist making a brilliant discovery and becoming famous for it. In this particular instance, it wasn't just 1 or 10, not even just 100. It was an entire bunch of international experts who worked for years on this particular project to finally get to this one beautiful result, which has now become a landmark in the history of physics. So this is one example. And now I'll radically switch gears to move on to something else. You guys must have heard of CRISPR editing. Genetic editing. Has anyone heard of CRISPR over here? If you have, just type a yes in the chat box. Anyone who's heard of the term CRISPR? And yes, someone has heard of it. Most of you must have heard of it. So basically, genetic editing, as many of you have heard or have read in the newspapers, is something which is attracting a massive amount of attention nowadays as we shift our focus to more and more sophisticated technologies. This is one tool which is proving to be really, really crucial in our advance forward. And genetic editing is really exciting because it has applications all over the place. You can make superior crops, healthier and more productive animals. You can treat diseases, and at the same time, you could potentially use it to engineer humans as well, some kind of superhumans kind of science fiction thing. And it did have a massive effect because the Chemistry Nobel Prize last year went to the two people who pioneered the discovery of this system for genetic editing called CRISPR. And it's not just these two people. There's yet another person, and there are multiple other people. This is one example of a person, this is Feng Zhang. He works at MIT, who are among the innovators who are leveraging the power of CRISPR for things no one even imagined when it was first discovered 10 years ago. In fact, he even designed a diagnostic test for COVID-19 using CRISPR, which is something which has since been done by multiple people. And COVID-19 brings me to this particular superstar, which has been the cause of significant agony over the last 2 years, the virus which causes the COVID-19. The fact that the entire world was in a pandemic promoted international groups, promoted institutes, scientists. Even I myself worked on a project for COVID-19 to somehow figure out a way to combat this. And this involved an effort which took place over different facets. People were making diagnostic tests, people were trying to find out drugs which could be effective against the virus, new and better vaccines against the virus. And finally, the crux of all of this stemmed from the fact that we now had the technology to understand this pathogen much better than what we had 10, 15 years ago, which is why you have vaccines. Many of you must already have been vaccinated. You have vaccines available less than a year after the virus first broke out, which is something which you could not have imagined in your wildest dreams a few years ago. So what does this bring us to? The point I'm trying to make over here is that science in the 21st century is a very different beast than what it was traditionally. In fact, it is evolving at a massive rate every single year at a very fast pace. And these are some of the key facets which I feel define what science is becoming nowadays. And one of the cornerstones of this new phase, this new avatar of science, is that it has suddenly become much more collaborative than it used to be. Nowadays, it's no longer about the lone genius who stays up overnight and finds out something amazing. It's about big teams of experts who work in synchrony to finally come up with something brilliant. Science is a lot more faster and a lot more inclusive now. Even countries which traditionally belong to the developing section of the world are now major players in science. And that's primarily because of how democratic information sharing has become. You have Twitter, some paper comes out in the US, by afternoon, you know it's come out because you follow it on Twitter, right? You're sitting in Bangalore. In fact, multidisciplinary science, which is something I will be focusing on quite a bit for the next second segment of the presentation, is something which has come to define science, that you can no longer just segregate things into convenient bins of chemistry, physics, and biology, but instead you are expected to know and understand a bit of everything so that you can make sense of the problem as a whole. And of course, computers have been something which has really, really sped up this entire process. For instance, many of you must have heard of DNA sequencing. When Frederick Sanger first came up with the idea of sequencing way back in the 70s, it used to take feet-long agarose gels and days to sequence something as large as a few base pairs, a few kilo base pairs. Nowadays, you have these tiny machines which come. It's called a nanopore. It's a tiny machine with a USB cable. You put your sample into it, plug it into your computer. A few hours later, you can sequence thousands of base pairs, which is something which is straight out of a science fiction movie. The point I'm trying to make is that a combination of technology, a combination of change in attitudes and perspectives have now made science into a completely different entity than what it was just 10 years ago. And this is something incredible. because now the onus is on the people who will become the scientists of the next few years. It's not just on science anymore. It's not just on the politicians who give money anymore. It's on people to not just restrict themselves to a few techniques, but instead have the creativity and the capability to think as though they know everything and work in a manner where they adapt to every new challenge which comes across. But I do understand that it isn't a straightforward thing to understand. Scientific research isn't a very straightforward thing to understand. So here's this beautiful infographic which I stumbled across, which could help most of you figure out how the typical process of a scientific discovery occurs in academia, that is in a research institute. So usually you, of course, you do start off with getting an education. However much you might dislike it, you do need to study. So you people do a bachelor's, people do a master's. If you're like me, you end up doing a PhD, and then you probably go for postdoc positions. This is strictly in the context of academic research. After this, that is when at the PhD and the master's, the PhD stage is usually when people get into serious research. So over here, you usually start off with studying the literature and finding out what was done on a problem you are interested in before you actually get to doing it. Your supervisor, who is the faculty with whom you're working, usually writes grants to get money for you to work with, which are often very expensive. It can go into lakhs and crores for a single project. And well, you spend the long nights, you do the lab work, gather the data, and finally you analyze the data, and then you try to make sense of whatever you just did and try to figure out, does your work actually translate into a story? Did all the data you gathered, did all the things you studied, do they actually mean something at this stage? And that is when you get to the stage of finally writing it up and communicating it to a journal. So this is something I would not want to get into at the moment because of the time constraint. But suffice to say that you send your whatever you have written to a journal, other scientists read it, they decide whether it is rigorous enough, whether you have done things properly enough, whether it's good enough to be published. And finally, you get published, which is great. That's what you worked for. So yes, if your work is important enough, people cite you and you become famous, or the work becomes important and other people work on the same thing which you worked on. The benefits from all of this is that, well, you develop new technologies, obviously. You do cure diseases, which is one of the major goals of modern life sciences. And it satisfies your intellectual curiosity, the need to know, how does this work? Why does this happen? How does this function? And that's when I would like to jump into industrial research. Industrial research is something which takes place in corporates and companies, because science is not limited to just universities and colleges. A massive amount of science takes place in companies, in private sector companies, which, for instance, Biocon, some of you must have definitely heard of this. And they make products which are used by society and scientists as well. It's just slightly different. Over here, a PhD is generally not a necessity, but a lot of people do go for it. Grant writing is not really required because industries are for-profit companies, so they generate their own money, and the profit from what you develop is what funds the next set of projects. And finally, the goal can be to cure a disease. You can make a vaccine. If you're Pfizer, you do end up making a vaccine on other medicines. You develop new technologies, obviously. You have better imaging techniques. You have more sophisticated instruments being put out by companies on the market every single day. The intellectual curiosity is something which is really not a very strong motivating factor when it comes to industrial research, simply because you are interested in profit over here. It's not just for the sake of knowledge. However, this is as important as academic research. So now that I have proceeded to bombard you with a large number of terms, let me show you something a little more familiar. Does anyone kind of recognize what this boxed item over here is? You can put it in the chat box right away. If you just know where this is at. No, I know it's a neuron. Where have you seen this? I've taken this page from somewhere. Oh, yes. Great, man. Great. So yeah, we get it. Yep. It is the NCERT 10th standard textbook. Precisely. All of you have read this, all of you understood this, and you know that a neuron is there. There's something called a neuron. It's got dendrites, axons, nerve endings. It carries stimulus, and that's how you sense things. That's how you think. NCERT condensed this entire thing into less than 200 words over here. Now let me show you something else. Yep. Well, what do you think? Each and every sentence, each half sentence of this particular paragraph has not just these, but multiple papers, multiple decades of discovery, which led to this particular bit of knowledge. This tiny little page you see over here, well, each of these boxes are actual articles, many of which run to 30, 40 pages, and definitely must have taken 5, 6, 7, 10 years of effort to finally come up with. And all of this conveniently condensed into this lovely little paragraph which you read, and you understand what a neuron is. Well, the fun part if you're a scientist is figuring out how this entire thing works. And that is what leads to these discoveries. Well, now I'll move on to a slightly different aspect, jumping from here. We do appreciate what science is, and we do appreciate what scientists do. Another thing to appreciate is the state of the nation and the state of the society, because there are two elements which are important, science and society. Without either of them, the other could not exist. And there's a reason for this. Science is a publicly funded initiative. So it becomes important to consider the country and the society in which we are carrying out our science. Especially with regard to India, science has had a very difficult relationship. And the reason being, India has for decades been stuck in this tag of being developing, forever developing. And a country like China, for instance, has even overtaken some of the most productive countries across the world in terms of scientific research, which kind of made India realize a few years ago that we did need to catch up if we were ever to compete with countries like these. And India had an existing system of the universities. You have all heard of the universities, which are there in many of the states, which are very reputed, have been around for decades and decades, and are pretty good as well. So the key difference here being that the universities were catering to the need or the requirement of the community, of society. For instance, you need professors. The universities were producing PhD graduates. You need postgraduates for trained jobs. The universities were producing postgraduates. You need graduates for lesser trained jobs. They were getting that as well. Diplomas for other jobs. All of this the universities were doing. But what was really needed to kickstart a revolution in Indian science was bringing about a set of people who could work at the international level, who could compete with international standards, and to foster this new generation of people who could do 21st century science and who could do it at the same way it was done anywhere else in the world, at the best places in the world, is why the concept of the ICERs came up around 15 years ago. And the basic idea which underlies the ICERs is the concept of interdisciplinary research. No longer are departments segregated and isolated based on what they study. It's not that the mathematician never bothers about what a cell is. It's not that the chemist never thinks about what quantum mechanics is. The science of this century needs you to think of all of these things. So the ICER started off around 15 years ago. The first ICER to be established was Pune, which is doing fantastically well. The second was ICER Kolkata, followed by Mohali, Bhopal, Thiruvananthapuram. And then you have two new ICERs, which are Tirupati and Berhampur. The ICERs started off with the idea for promoting multidisciplinary science in India. They continue to do that, and it's important to appreciate why there was an emphasis on multidisciplinary science. To do this, it's important to understand what were the pros and the cons of the conventional system. The conventional system always relied on segregating disciplines. You had the biologists, you had the physicists, and you had the mathematicians. And all of these were excellent at their job. They were excellent at what they knew, but they didn't know what the other person was doing. And it's great when you're studying. It's great for laying foundation because you study in depth. You know your subject really well. But the issue is, after a point of time, the type of questions you can ask, the type of challenges you can take up, it becomes very restricted. There is only so much you can do within your own field, which is why, and the world has become a much more complicated place. It has become a much more demanding place. For instance, consider something like prosthetic limbs. Earlier, if you had to get a prosthetic limb, if you lost your arm in an accident, they would just put a replica of wood, cardboard, metal, whatever over here, which would be like a lifeless hunk over here and would just stay there. Prosthetic limbs are evolving to become much more sophisticated than that. A material scientist, for instance, could come up with great suggestions for materials which are light and durable at the same time. A life scientist could come up with a great description of which precise muscles, which neurons could be connected to a prosthetic limb to improve the functionality and give the user more control over this limb. And robotics can be introduced to help even disabled people control limbs and move around and their regain their accessibility to a great extent. And this is an example of the kind of problem which requires interdisciplinary thinking. And nowadays, these are the kind of problems we have been facing everywhere throughout the world, which is why we need to move from a zone wherein you had only sciences operating independently to a world wherein everything works together in harmony. And it's also because technological advancements have made it much more possible to learn about new things in a much more accessible manner for all of us. Well, this is just a cursory look, just some of the things which are actually happening at IISER Bhopal right now. I can talk about Bhopal because I've been there. Other IISERs are doing similarly well. So look at some of the things. Did you ever imagine that photosynthesis was something you learned in your 11th? You've heard about it in 10th, 9th and 10th. But did you imagine that you could somehow bring in quantum mechanics in photosynthesis? Well, people are doing that, and people are doing that exceptionally well. Because once they realized that you could actually model the entire reaction much better, you could understand the process much better when you brought in quantum theory. That is when people started paying attention to this. You can even use artificial intelligence. Many of you must be enamored by this buzzword which is going around nowadays, AI and ML. So you could use it to detect diseases in an early stage. And diseases like COVID-19, HIV, influenza, all of these infectious diseases, these are things which require more sophisticated tools. We have been fighting against HIV for 2, 3, 4 decades now, and it requires more sophisticated tools to finally beat it. And these are the kind of questions which require sophisticated tools, and it requires people who can think across different disciplines to answer these. So the question arises, why is an IISER well suited to help you become a more dynamic and a more holistic and a more well-rounded scientist? I can start off with a few particular reasons why. For instance, this is an actual screenshot of my college transcript. These are all the courses I did. And if you thought that you did not have to study PCMB after you graduated, it would only be one subject. Well, if you join an IISER, you do have to study everything. These two, the first two which you see over here, these are, do I have a pointer? Let me just check if I have a pointer. Oh, beautiful. So this entire block over here is what I did in my first 2 years. And as you can see, I did everything, PCMB and even environmental sciences to some extent. And well, I also did a course on economics, which is somewhere around here, I guess. Yes, it's over here, a course on economics as well, basic electronics, all of that stuff. So basically, I have a general understanding of the fundamentals of all of these fields. And even after I got into my majors, it wasn't restricted to any one field. It's not like just botany, just zoology, just epigenetics. Nope. Every single thing, from cell biology to immunology, virology, every single, even developmental biology, all these things were covered in various courses. And that is a brilliant feature of the IISERs, because since they have scientists who are actually experts in their fields and they recruit a palette of scientists, they are able to offer these courses to the undergrads, which give them a flavor of all the major domains of science, and thereby helps them perform better whenever they need to. Whenever they have a new challenge, they have some foundation which they can use to work with. The other great thing and the other beautiful thing about the IISERs is the faculty which they're recruiting. Almost all the new faculty which are coming in are exceptionally brilliant scientists who are extremely active and have done beautiful work abroad in all the fanciest places you can imagine, from Harvard to Cambridge to MIT, everywhere. These people have done postdocs, and some people have even done PhDs in some of the greatest places you can imagine. And they're back here to do great science. And they have really generous fundings. They're very competitive and they're doing exceptional work. This is just a list of the news articles which came out this year in 2021. And as you can see, well, there's a massive amount of work taking place even within a single department at a single IISER. Oh, fun fact, this particular one was what I did for my master's thesis for the the COVID-19 project. So anyway, if you do end up in a great place, you do end up doing good work. And the third thing which I want to emphasize on is the fact that at ICES, there is this great culture of encouraging undergraduates to take up research very seriously. It's not just cursory. It's not like you have a lab course or like you have labs in school. Like we also had labs in school. It's not like a lab course when you just go and you do something and then you write up your lab notebook, get it checked, pass the viva, and that's an A grade. Nope. There is an actual emphasis on doing serious science, and there's an emphasis on doing it early. From your second, third year onwards, you go for multiple internships, and all of these, or most of these, if you're serious enough, all of these will be at labs which are professional labs, which are actual research labs working on serious projects. And that will give you a great flavor of how competitive and how beautiful science is. And that kind of an environment and that kind of an exposure is something which the ICES deliver, and which is difficult to get at many other places. So these are the three things I wanted to highlight. And the reason I'm harping on this, the reason I'm bringing this up again and again and again, is because it's the combination of all of these that creates an environment which is necessary for you to do well, which is necessary to make you a scientist who can compete in this modern world. And it's because the ICES excel on multiple counts when you take this particular checklist into account. For instance, you have a great academic environment. The academic environment thrives based on how creative and how energetic and how interested the people are in the science they do. And the people over there do excel at this, which is why it's a great academic environment for learning. The guidance is amazing because you are literally learning courses and you are working in labs under the supervision of people who have been to the best places in the world. So they know what is the cutting edge of science happening anywhere across the globe. And coming from an ICER, the breadth of exposure you have and the connections you will make and the kind of things you will learn will enable you to go for great career opportunities and make a very informed decision about most of these. And one of the best things, and this is one of my favorites, is that since the ICERs are all new and since the government gave so much of such a massive amount of funding so generously, most of the infrastructure is very well maintained and it's all new. So it's all modern and very convenient. So even in the labs, the research equipment you use, it saves a lot of trouble as compared to the older equipment people have in many of the older places. So I personally know this because I did intern at the IISc as well. And in some tiny things, you do have a easier time if you're in a good lab at ICER. So, and here's another thing which people rarely talk about, but it's very true. The community you are forced to be with and the community you get to be with at ICER is very competitive. Because you may be good, you may be the school topper. When you go there, you will have 15 other people who were school toppers and you will have 50 other people who are as good as you, if not better, which means you have the motivation and you have some incentive to compete and to be better than the rest of them, which is what drives you to work hard and to do well. So making it to an ICER, obviously, if you want to study an ICER, you need to get in through the gate somehow. So there are three ways in which we can launch you right into the campus. One way, which is the way I got in, was clearing the KVPY. So you can write the KVPY 3 times in your 11th, in your 12th, and in your first year of college if you join somewhere else. But do note the cutoffs are very competitive. So take note of that before you plan your strategy. You can also write the JEE Advanced. The JEE Advanced merit list offers direct admission into the ICERs, provided you have a high enough rank. It has been my observation that the rank cutoff has been getting progressively more competitive over the last few years. The ICER aptitude test is also an excellent way to get into an ICER. It's held every single year. So check the dates and you can fill up that as well. The programs which are available at all the ICERs, well, there are five major disciplines which are commonly available at every single ICER, which is PCMB plus environmental sciences. There are also specific ICERs which are now offering degrees in the engineering sciences. Take note, this is not a BTech, this is a BS. So the focus is more on a research-oriented approach towards studying engineering, not on a job-centric or a company-centric, industry-centric approach. So IISER Bhopal is offering these courses. Other IISERs have also started, which is fantastic for those of you who are inclined towards that direction. So I understand that a lot of this is new and many of you might be mildly confused about how this entire thing fits together. So here's a quick flowchart for your reference. I hope this will be useful. So you start off, you begin your study at an IISER. You move on to your first year where you do all your core subjects. You move into your second year wherein you continue doing your core subjects. Your core subjects are basically all the courses, PCMB, environmental sciences, and all the electives which you have to do anyway. Some IISERs have come up with the concept of pre-majors, which basically means rather than studying 4 or 5 subjects, you have to study 3, but take more courses in these. Personally, I prefer the older model, but then that's because I trained in the older model. No real reason why. The third and the fourth are your most crucial years at the IISER, because that is when you will be doing your major courses. That is whichever subject you choose to major in. For instance, I majored in biology. So third and fourth year, you do all your advanced level courseworks, which is more difficult and much more challenging, but also much more productive. And after this, if you're a BS student, you could either be a BS student or you could be a 5th year student and do your MS thesis project and thereby get a master's degree as well. BS students also have the option to go for an MS thesis, following which many people go for a PhD program like me. If you are planning to go to Europe, it's usually 3 to 4 years. If you're planning to do it in the US or India, it's usually 5, 6, sometimes even 6.5 or so years. And you could also go for a job immediately after your thesis. You could also go for that if you're a BS student. Or you could just join an integrated PhD program where you do a master's and a PhD within a same 7-year program. That's very common in India and the US. And the PhD program which you have, you graduate. If you're interested in science, if you're still interested in science, you go for postdoc, which is very tough, but is also very helpful. And at any of these stages, you can move into the industry. Industry pays well. If you get a great job, definitely go for it. The PhD program, once you get a PhD, you can go for it. Once you do a postdoc, you can go for it. Even if you're over here, you can go for it. And those of you who will still be interested after so many years in science could try to become a professor. You could try to go for a career in academia, which is ultra competitive and really difficult, but extremely rewarding. So to answer the obvious question, where do you get from here? What is the path up ahead? How clear is it? What do we know about this? Well, you have PhD positions at top labs across the world. You can apply for all of these and get through. If you get through, it'll be great. If you get to a beautiful institute, life is excellent after that. In the sense that it will be difficult because you have to compete, but at the same time, you will understand how satisfying it overall is. You can also go for industrial research and development, which is basically all the companies which are involved in research get a regular job and it pays better than academia pays. A lot of startups are coming up which are in the domain of science and technology nowadays. So all of these represent wonderful opportunities. I've just listed a few fields into which I've seen some of my seniors migrate after they graduated from IISERs. So it's a bunch of stuff, and it's not at all an exhaustive list. It's not even close to being an exhaustive list. But these are some of the things which you could take up. These are some of the things which you could pursue. And all of these require some specialization of some sort. Industrial R&D is something which I would like to highlight once again, because it is something which is not fairly obvious until you are in this field. So basically companies, they work towards developing new tools, new instruments, better instruments, more effective instruments, new technologies, more efficient processes. It could be anything from doing reactions, setting up a PCR, diagnostic tests, sophisticated microscopes, everything. Companies do a ton of work. And the key idea, of course, being a private company, is to generate profits. But the key concept driving them is to improve and to come up with more effective and creative ways and innovative ways to do something. And that is what drives a lot of industrial research. Two of the hottest fields which are coming up in industrial research are obviously biotech and healthcare. And given the current climate crisis, even the environmental sciences and agriculture are of major attraction. So these are domains which you could move into once you are done with the basic level education over here. Finally, the one thing which I wanted to summarize with was this slide, which I will not proceed to read out because these are These are things which cannot be quantified. These are things which cannot be enunciated by someone else to you. I can just show you these and encourage you to question yourself and explore and meditate upon whether you would fit into this. Because see, the thing is, the ICERs and the entire concept of science sounds very exciting. It is exciting once you get into it, and if you do like it, it's beautiful. It is satisfying every day. It is difficult, but it is satisfying every day. But the thing is, you need to have perseverance. You need to have the capacity to keep working. You need to have the interest in science. You need to have an interest in research, in academia, in knowing things, in not in finding out why this thing works or how to do this. And these are these are just some of the qualities. There are like tons of others, but these are some of the things which could help you decide whether this kind of a career course would be appropriate for you or not. Because if it is, I would encourage you to think about it. And finally, if you do wish to learn more, and I'm fairly certain we will not be able to cover all the questions you have, and even if we do, many of you will be having questions 24 hours later, or shower or dinner later, you will have questions. So I would like to direct you to this particular account on Quora, which I'm fairly certain all of you are aware of, this platform called Quora. So you can go to the page of SDC IISER Bhopal. This is basically a student council, the Students Development Council at IISER Bhopal. And this was a page we started around 3 years ago. And the basic idea was to answer questions which people had about the ICERs. We started off very slow, 5-10 questions at a time. And now it's grown into this behemoth, which keeps helping out people. People keep contributing. Now it's no longer the core team of us who started out. Now it's a lot more people writing, but still everything is written by the students, and it's usually to answer queries which the students post. So this is something you might want to check out. And if you would like to read further, these are a few links which you could follow up. I'm fairly certain this presentation will be shared by the school to you. So, or the talk will be put up, so you can always follow up on these links later. So now that we're done, I'm done with my end. So we could move on to questions right now. How well did I do on time? Oh my, I did finish in time. That is a surprise.
I request the participants to post your queries in the chat box. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am, would you like me to go over the questions? We have only a few, so I think we could deal with all of those. Would you like me to start off?
Yes, sir.
All right, ma'am. So the first question which we got somewhere around 557 is what are the options to pursue in science stream apart from MBBS? I think I answered it. You summarized the talk before the talk started, but I hope I answered it. These are the avenues you have. Short answer, if you want to do an undergraduate in the sciences, the best place in India is IISc. If you cannot get to if you cannot get to the IISc, then the next best place are the ICERs. And if you do well enough, all the places, these places will be equally good, because you will be able to get to go between places, do your interns in different places. I have done that. I was at IISER Bhopal, but I did my interns for 3.5 years at IISc. And yeah, so you can get to all of these places. So these are the small circle of places which you should be targeting. Some of the top IITs as well are fairly decent at this, so you could try for that as well. Picture of black hole, these are not questions, it's fine. Is it possible to do research without being affiliated to any institution? I would say yes, but it is equally difficult to be taken seriously and equally difficult to do serious work. Typically, if you think about an experimental lab, instruments, resources, reagents, all of these things are so inordinately expensive. They're so exorbitantly built that it is impossible for an individual to actually do any meaningful work. On a regular day, if you are in a very active lab, on a regular day, your expenditure could run into thousands of rupees. So, or at least 1,000 rupees if you are actually doing work in the lab. So yes, technically you could do research on your own because there is no legal rule saying that you can't do research independently. but it's almost impossible. But some people do that, especially theoretical work. A lot of people do theoretical work on their own, and some of them have brilliant insights. You can always get in touch with someone, a professor is an academia later on, communicate your views to them, and that is often encouraged. There are a few brilliant people who come along like that, and that is beautiful. I really encourage that. Will commerce students benefit from this webinar? I'm not entirely sure, but I would say that knowing about something is always a bit better than not knowing about something. So yeah, man, I guess you do benefit by knowing that something like this exists. If nothing else, you can talk more intelligently at the next dinner you attend. So if I wanted to do engineering research, would ISER be?
Next question is, what are the good sources to prepare for KVPY?
Oh, okay. Where is this, ma'am? It's not in the Q&A box. Or did someone put it up in chat?
It's in chat.
Oh, all right. Okay. So, oh, that's a lot of questions, man. Yeah.
Ma'am, if Catherine ma'am and Naina ma'am read out the questions.
Sure, ma'am, sure.
Yeah, I was just getting done with the Q&A box. But anyway,
Yeah.
I'll answer the KVPY one first. KVPY would be a more elaborate discussion. I'm not at all sure I could do justice in 5 to 10 minutes over here. So I will venture not to do that. I'm very sorry for this, because if I do, I will end up eating time into other questions. And if I don't take at least 15 minutes to tell you, then I will not be doing justice. So I'm very sorry. For now, I will have to skip that question.
So now there's another question. How do we train for the entrance exams? And that student is in grade 9, class 9.
Oh my. You shouldn't ask me how to train for entrance exams. I dislike entrance exams, and yeah, the one entrance exam I did very well in while I was an ISER was a little bit of a fluke. So I don't know, man. I think you should study regularly. I mean, what else can I tell you? It's been like 6-7 years since I wrote entrances, so I don't know the answer to that. Sorry.
One more question, elaborate on the placement opportunities at ISER.
That's a great question. So that is a great question because it's also a difficult question to answer. Rather than giving you a rosy picture, I will be honest with you guys. Do understand very clearly that if your objective is to land a job as soon as possible, the ISERs are not a very advisable option for you. The reason being, nowhere in the world is science considered something which is a mode or a medium for instant gratification. And that is embodied in this system as well. If you do get a BSMS from ISER, it is not that you won't get a job. You will get a job if you are good enough and if you try hard enough. It's not that you won't. But the thing is, compared to, let's say, a BTech from an IIT or a BTech from a top NIT, your chances will be lower, simply because the number of avenues into which you can apply is a little lesser. Even a lot of the jobs which I showed you on a slide, on I think the third or the fourth last slide, they require additional specialization after BSMS. So if your goal is to get a job immediately after your bachelor's, you should consider going for a BTech rather than going into science. If you have family compulsions, something of that sort, then you should consider that.
There's another question from Manushree DAV Girls Gopalapuram. Is the procedure for getting into ISERs same as that for getting into an IIT?
Not entirely the same. I just showed on a slide. I think there was a slide dedicated to how you get into an ISER. So I would recommend you to refer to that once again. It's fairly self-explanatory, so you can go over that once again. It's in this presentation, which I'm fairly certain they will share, so you can go over that. Yeah. I see there's a question which I actually wanted to answer. It's called, it's phrased, is pursuing PhD better abroad or in India? If abroad, which country is preferable? So this is a question which is very common, and this is a question which is very common at my level as well, which is at a master's level. And I would like to answer this question because this is just something I just got done with. I would phrase it this way. If you do want to do a PhD in India, you need to target the top places in India. At least in a general sense, if I were to speak about biology, at the moment, as of now, the top places in India in order, definitely, the first would be NCBS, then you would have the IISc, and then you would have ISER Pune. And then the other IISers, then maybe IIT Kanpur, IIT Bombay, couple of other IITs maybe. These would be the great places in India to do a PhD. And you would have a couple of highly specialized laboratories and CSIR centers, which are doing pretty good work. But do not stay in India to do a PhD if you are just going to go to any university or any other place. If that is the case, try abroad. Abroad, if you do get into one of the Ivy Leagues in the US or something, go for that. If you get into a regular university in the US, try for something good back home. If not, go abroad. If you really, really just want to travel or you just want the tag of having gone abroad, go for it. No one's going to stop you. Europe is a very attractive destination for a lot of people. In fact, a lot of my own batchmates. And Europe does give you a PhD in 3 to 4 years. So that's something a lot of people do prefer. And some institutes in Europe are exceptionally good, like the Max Plancks. So this is something really great. And a lot of places in Germany are very good. The UK are excellent. So I would say at the end of the day, it boils down to your personal preferences and what choices do you have at hand. When I was applying to PhD, my acceptances, I interviewed at 3 places in India: IIT Bombay, IISc, and NCBS. I got accepted by all 3 of them. And I got 2 offers from Europe as well, in Finland and in Germany. I finally decided NCBS for a variety of reasons, but at the end of the day, it was because of scientific excellence. I'm not saying the places abroad weren't excellent. The place in Germany, which was exceptionally great. IIS is also amazingly well. But then a lot of other factors, like how is the work environment? How are the people? What interests do you have? Which lab do you want to go to? And sometimes even personal things like your family or maybe something more personal. These things will play a very important role by the time you decide to apply for a PhD, because when you apply for a PhD, you'll no longer be 18, you'll be 23. And I think a lot of things will be very different at 23. So I would say, rather than making up your mind right now, you should consider a large number of factors, but definitely apply to all the places which interest you, because it's better to have multiple acceptances and then try to decide what you want, rather than restricting your choices and then forcing yourself to take something which falls into your lap or which you get somehow. So apply for whatever you find interesting, get those acceptances, and then think about what you want to do. Don't make up your mind don't be prejudiced. Don't make up your mind from the beginning itself. Yeah.
This question is about the future prospects of forensics. What should we major in, and which IISSE is the best to have a career in forensic science?
I don't know too much about forensics, but my best guess would be chemistry and biology, because those are essentially what I understand a lot of forensics work nowadays is. Yeah, biology as well as chemistry. If you're just asking me about the IISers, then in terms of research quality, I would say IISer Pune is the best. If you can get into Pune, brilliant. If you don't, consider any of the other older IISers, which is Bhopal, Kolkata, Mohali, Thiruvananthapuram also. If not, then either of the 2 newer IISers. And yeah, you can also consider some of the good IITs, which are doing well in biology. IIT Kanpur is doing fantastic work in biology. IIT Bombay is also pretty good. I think Madras is also nice. Delhi is also good. These are places you could consider for biology. Yes.
Is there a possibility for a student who has pursued BTech or Biotech to pursue masters at IISer?
Yes. So there's an issue over there. Most of the IISers do not offer a segregated master's program. That's simply because the actual program they do offer is a BSMS, which is a combined program. However, I am definitely aware of one student who is a batchmate over here, who did a master's, who did a BSc, and then he went to IISer Mohali for their master's program. In fact, even IISer Thiruvananthapuram had floated an idea to offer a segregated master's program. You could consider that. Yeah.
There is somebody who's asked about mathematics at IISers.
Oh yeah, math is really good. Of course, I wouldn't say it is the best in India, because you always have the ISI, the Indian Statistical Institute, which is hands down the best, and also CMI right there in Chennai, which is fantastic. But mathematics is at the ISER is also pretty great. You have pure mathematics, which is very fundamental and very abstract in nature. So if you have someone who really likes going into that kind of a theoretical field, you will find your interest catered to.
So off the track, there's one enthusiastic student who's been asking about job opportunities at Japan. So he wants to know what course he needs to take to pursue a job in Japan. So if you could enlighten him about it, that'd be
This is,
great.
I'm not even sure how I could even begin to answer, because I have no answer, to be extremely frank. I'm not even sure why Japan. So I don't know. This is such a broad question. What course can I take to work on Japan? I mean, I don't know. You could take any course for that matter, from culinary to hospitality to BTech. You could take any course. That I'm not sure how to answer the question. I'm really sorry.
There's this question who's asked about the uses of pursuing biotechnology.
I would say that if you could call the 20th century, which is basically 1900s, the age of physics, all your great legends of physics, all the great quantum mechanics, Schrodinger, Einstein, Bohr, all of them, they dominated the field. This could be the century of biology. In fact, it is turning out to be the century of the life sciences, because that is what is grabbing the most attention nowadays. That is what most of the industrial funding, the academic funding, is coming through. So I would say that if you do take up a course in biotech, and if you do get a BSc or a master's in biotech, you will have excellent opportunities both in the industry as well as in academia. In academia, you will have great opportunities because you will be trained at a lot of great techniques, which technical tools and technical ways of doing things, which is great. A lot of projects are becoming increasingly clinical oriented nowadays, for which they need to develop therapies, and for that people with a biotech background are really preferred. In the industry, obviously, because if you're a biotechnologist, you are literally someone who is suited to work in the biotechnology industry. So yes, that is a good field, but do keep this in mind. If you are doing biotech, do it from a good place, or at least even if you can't get to a good place for your bachelor's, try to move into a good place for your master's or afterwards, or higher than your master's. Because the thing is, there are a large number of colleges which offer biotech. You can get a biotech degree from almost any college nowadays. Every nook and cranny, you have a college which is offering a bachelor's in biotech. So simply having a bachelor's in biotech is not going to help you. Having a good degree in biotech is what will actually set you apart from the crowd.
Yes, this question. If I wanted to do engineering research, then would ISER be research focused in engineering like the CSE and electrical branch, or is it industry focused? Also, can I do the CSE without biology?
Yeah, obviously. So when you join the engineering sciences division at an ISER, you are not expected to do biology. The engineering sciences division is completely separate. You will be taking course in mathematics and physics for sure. In basic foundations of mathematics and physics, definitely you will have courses in that. You will be given a choice to take courses from biology, chemistry, all of these places. Of course, this could change by the time you get, but it will not change very radically. There can be minor tweaks here and there. But yes, to answer your question, the research, the course which you will be undertaking is definitely going to be much more focused towards a research career rather than an industrial career. The IITs and the NITs are what train you for an industrial career. The engineering sciences at maybe ISC, I'm not sure they have one, but they do have engineering departments which do great work. And ISOs also, ISOs just setting it up. But the thing is, that is focused towards more of an academic pursuit rather than an industrial pursuit. Yeah.
Which ISER would be good for physics?
Oh, I think unless I'm very much mistaken, I saw Kolkata was doing great in physics, even Pune for that matter. Pune is doing well in almost everything, man. So, but ISA Kolkata does really great work in physics, from what I've heard from my friends who are in the physics department. So they're definitely more knowledgeable than me. But I think ISA Kolkata does really great work in physics.
What marks are required in the ISER aptitude test in order to get admission in any of the ISERs?
That is a question I cannot answer. Again, the reason I cannot answer is because I cannot predict what the cutoff will be. It entirely depends on how well you guys will perform. And the level of competition is significantly increasing every single year. For example, when I applied, which was way back in 2016, if you were a KVPY fellow, you were almost assured that you would get an ICER, no doubts about it. That assurance is ebbing away rapidly nowadays. In fact, if you don't have a good rank, you won't even get a good ICER even if you're a KVPY fellow. And that is a stream with the least competition, because when you're writing the KVPY exam, the competition is intense. People get filtered out. You have a few people, and you have enough seats for these few people in the ICERs, because it's proportionate for each stream. Each stream has a certain quota of seats at different ICERs, but even that is getting difficult now. So I really cannot tell you what the cutoff will be, because I am neither setting the question papers nor have I written the exam for 5 years. I wrote mine 5 years ago. So your cutoff will be significantly different from what mine is. Yeah, next I could take.
Catherine, you're muted.
Yes, we do have queries, but I think the call will be shut automatically by
Yeah.
7 p.m. So I'd like to conclude. I'm very honored to give the vote of thanks and express my gratitude, especially when Sri Padmanabh addresses our students. And this gratitude I express on behalf of the DAV group of schools. Firstly, I'd like to thank our secretary for this wonderful initiative, without whom this would not have been possible. And I'm sure this great initiative would benefit the student community to a great extent and give them a better clarity on their career paths. I also express my hearty gratitude to our Director, Academics and Innovation, Srimati Shanti Ashokan, for being instrumental in organizing this program. I also thank our speaker for the day, Sri Padmanabh, for agreeing to our requests repetitively, time and again, and addressing and guiding our students with a big smile on his face. We would always be indebted to him for his valuable time and excellent guidance. I thank our headmistress, Srimati Swarna Prabhakaran, and all the other panelists for their coordination and contribution. My hearty gratitude to all the parents and students for their enthusiastic participation and willingness to take this initiative forward. Before we conclude, I'd like to give a reminder about our next session, which happens to fall on the 20th of November, and the subject is cybersecurity by Shri P. Chandrasekhar. So kindly do attend that program and register for the program too. Thank you once again, Sri Padmanabh and the other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. Namaste.